Good evening. With the Guyana Learning Channel's News and Capsule for Thursday, January 27, 2022, I am Kingsley Bryan. Here are the top stories we're covering this evening. We'll tell you first that the education sector was allotted $74.4 billion, and that is to further enhance the provision of equitable access to quality education. Then, the Natural Resource Fund to receive nearly $1 billion in 2022 to ensure the government's accelerated development agenda. And pension increased to $28,000 monthly. Public assistance also increased to $14,000 monthly. And income tax threshold increased to $75,000, a total of $1.3 billion being placed back into the hands of taxpayers. And in news from the region, we'll tell you that the U.S. can assist Caribbean with financing. At least that's what the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, says, on a need to assist the region in pandemic recovery and climate change. And on the international scene, 224 new species discovered in 2020. Greater Mekong set to be a world heavyweight for the discovery of new species. And now for the news in detail. Budget 2022 was presented in the National Assembly under the theme, Steadfast Against All Challenges, Resolute in Building One Guyana. The government has budgeted $74.4 billion for the country's education sector. This caters for reforming the school curriculum, expanding teachers' training programs, construction of new schools, and establishing robust system, among others. This year, the Education Ministry has been a significant increase to its budget compared to last year's $60.7 billion. During his budget presentation on Wednesday, Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, said that this allocation is in keeping with the government's 5-year Education Strategic Plan, 2021 to 2025, Vision 2030. He further added that improved access, quality, and relevance are essential to raising Guyana's human capital to the levels needed to advance and sustain the imminent transformative economic and social development. To this end, some $6.6 billion will be used to construct, rehabilitate, and maintain several educational facilities across the country. The senior finance minister explained that construction work will commence on the Prospect Secondary. Reconstruction will be undertaken on the North Rheinfeldt and Northwest Secondary Schools, both destroyed by fire last year. As it relates to the use of technological devices amid the pandemic, the government plans to equip 300 primary school teachers and 125 secondary school teachers with laptops and computing devices. Minister Singh said that approximately 11,000 tablets and flash drives loaded with teaching materials will be provided to students at the aforementioned levels to accommodate the growing number of smart classrooms. This transformational approach is budgeted at a cost of $295.7 million. This year, $1.2 billion has been earmarked to procure textbooks for students. Additionally, over $20 million will be used to purchase 2,000 microscience kits for an additional 100 primary schools. This is the first time that the government has provided 100% primary coverage. With this in mind, Minister Singh said that the government aims to improve the nation's future leaders' performance on the national and regional standardized tests. And still on the budget, given the ramp-up in oil production expected in 2022, Guyana expects that its Natural Resource Fund will receive nearly $1 billion in 2022. This was related to the National Assembly by Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh. Dr. Singh said, open quote, with 2 FPSO vessels expected to be in operation this year, it is anticipated that there will be 94 lifts from the Stabroek Block, 13 of which will be government lifts, end of quote. This represents more oil lifts than were made in the 2-year period since oil production began in December 2019 to the end of 2021. As Dr. Singh related, that period saw 69 lifts being exported from Guyana, of which 9 were for government. As per the production sharing agreement with ExxonMobil and its partners, X Corporation and CNOOC Limited. The revenues which will be gained from oil production in 2022 will begin to refill the Natural Resource Fund, as the government intends to withdraw all revenues currently in the account to partly finance Budget 2022. The minister explained that this will ensure the government's accelerated development agenda, with all its critical proposed investments and measures, can be financed without excessive borrowing or reliance on the introduction of new taxes. Inflows to the fund are expected to increase even more in the coming years, as ExxonMobil operationalizes several other production operations. Dr. Singh related that up to 6 projects could be in operation by 2026, with production about 1 million barrels of oil per day. This would represent a near quadrupling of the expected oil production for 2022 and a resultant significant increase in the country's revenues. And still on the financial blotter, some $2.3 billion has been allocated to increase old age pension from $25,000 to $28,000 monthly, which will see 65,000 senior citizens benefiting nationwide. Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, made the announcement Wednesday during the presentation of the 2022 budget. Government had earmarked some $2.6 billion in August 2021 to increase old age pension from $20,500 to $25,000 monthly. In addition to the increase for the seniors, the administration subsidized water and electricity, removed value-added taxes on essential food items and basic services. Together, these will result in safer mobility for our senior citizens and improved access to and affordability of food supplies. These will redound to improved management of chronic diseases such as hypertension and diabetes, which continue to be priorities, the minister added. Additionally, $432 million was set aside to provide relief to vulnerable persons under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Human Security Benefit Plan. This will see over 18,000 public assistance recipients benefiting from an increased payment of $14,000 per person. And we'll tell you now that taxpayers in the public and private sector will now be paying less tax, as the income tax threshold is budgeted to be increased from $65,000 to $75,000 monthly. Minister Ashni Singh made this announcement during the budget presentation on Wednesday. This increase, Minister Singh said, will see a total of $1.3 billion being placed back into the hands directly of the taxpayers in both the public and private sectors. Meanwhile, the government is seeking to allow taxpayers a deduction from their chargeable income for premiums paid for life and medical insurance, up to a maximum of 10% of their income or $30,000 monthly, whichever is lower. This deduction will reduce the amount of taxable income and ultimately the tax payable by the taxpayer, while at the same time secure assurance and assuage the concerns of many citizens on their long-term health care needs and the needs of their families in the unfortunate circumstance of their demise. This measure is projected to cost the government approximately $1.1 billion. And now in news from the sports sector. A sum of $2.2 billion has been allocated to expand and develop the nation's sports sector in 2022. Dr. Singh said some $1.4 billion is budgeted for sports infrastructure and development. Money will be injected into the completion of the synthetic track in Region 6 and 10, the multi-purpose sports facilities, the erection of stands at the National Track and Field Center, rehabilitation works at the National Stadium to support the Cricket Academy. Of this amount, $250 million is also budgeted for the continued improvement of the community grounds. In 2021, 25 community grounds across Regions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10 were upgraded. Also, preparatory works have begun for the construction of the multi-purpose sports facilities at Regions 2, 6, and 10. Meanwhile, Budget 2022 provide another $45.8 million for maintenance works to sports facilities including Mackenzie Sports Club, Kwakwani Recreational Center, the National Aquatic Center, and the Culgreen Pool. And that story was extracted and modified from the DPI. And in news from the region, If the United States wants to reduce the number of refugees from the Caribbean attempting to cross its borders, its government must pay more attention to the needs of the region. This is according to the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown. In a telephone interview with Reuters, Prime Minister Gaston Brown said that the U.S. can help the Caribbean with financing and aid to assist the region in recovering from the blow of the pandemic and the gradual debilitating effects of climate change. Several Caribbean countries are struggling with unsustainable debt loads, which according to the Reuters report is equivalent to 100% of each country's gross domestic product. Brown revealed that a lot of countries had difficulties with loans because multilateral agencies tend to classify them as middle or high-income nations, basing this criteria on per capita GDP measurements. This does not count in bigger costs a small island nation is facing because of climate change. That is why a lot of CARICOM governments turn to banks from China, which give them more leeway with their policies, Brown explained. And therefore, borrowing from Chinese banks should not be taken as a political statement. If the U.S. can put in a word to these agencies to change their criteria, it would provide a significant boost for the Caribbean. Open quote, we expect the United States would use its influence in the multinational financial institutions to effect that change, Brown said. According to the Washington-based Inter-American Dialogue that was cited by Reuters in their article, China has lent over $4 billion to Caribbean nations in the last 10 years. Most of the aid went to infrastructure development. The U.S. asked some $336 million to the Caribbean community, but a huge portion of it goes immediately to Haiti. Around $70 million is left, and this is what will be distributed among 13 other countries, according to Brown. The U.S. State Department did not immediately reply to a request for comment, Reuters disclosed, and that story was extracted and modified from Caribbean News Now. And on the international scene, a devil-horned newt, drought-resilient bamboo, and a monkey named after a volcano were among 224 new species discovered in the Greater Mekong region in 2020, a conservation group said on Wednesday, despite the intense threat of habitat loss. The discoveries listed in a report by the World Wildlife Fund, WWF, include a new rock gecko found in Thailand, a mulberry tree species in Vietnam, and a big-headed frog in Vietnam and Cambodia that is already threatened by deforestation. Some of the more curious creatures include the Popa langur, a monkey with long limbs and a long tail, named after the extinct volcano Mount Popa, home to about 100 of these monkeys, the largest population of the species. There's the cavefish discovered in Myanmar, colored a pale yellow-white, which is so unusual and different from other fish in the same family that scientists decided to create a whole new genus for it. Then there's the iridescent snake, its scales shifting through blues and greens in the light. The 224 discoveries underlined the rich biodiversity of the Mekong region, which encompasses Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. But it also highlights the threats facing wildlife in fragmented and degraded natural habitats, with experts and scientists urging greater international cooperation to preserve what's left. The area is home to some of the world's most endangered species. United Nations report last year said wildlife trafficking in Southeast Asia was creeping back after a temporary disruption from coronavirus restrictions, which saw countries shut borders and tighten surveillance. And that story was extracted and modified from CNN. And that's our news broadcast for Thursday, January 27, 2022. Please join us for a rebroadcast tomorrow morning. On behalf of myself and technical team, thanks for watching. Please stay tuned to our regular programming. And remember to observe all the necessary precautionary methods to fight off COVID-19. We're all in this together. Have a safe evening.